What if the monster you're afraid of isn't the creepy, socially awkward outcast from the movies? What if the real monster is the friendly contractor who lives down the street, the devoted father, the quiet army veteran? What if the most dangerous predator is the one who has mastered the art of being completely and utterly normal? Maureen Callahan's terrifying and meticulously researched book, American Predator, is the true story of a new kind of serial killer. A ghost in the system who shattered every rule the experts at the FBI thought they knew. He had no victim profile. He didn't kill close to home. He left no forensic evidence. For more than a decade, he moved across the country like a phantom, committing a series of brutal, random and seemingly disconnected crimes, all while living a quiet, unremarkable life in Anchorage, Alaska. This is not just a true crime story designed to scare you. It is a profound and disturbing philosophical inquiry into the nature of true, modern evil. It's the story of the hunt for Israel Keyes, a man who may have been the most meticulous and terrifyingly rational serial killer of the 21st century. And it is a stark reminder of the fragility of the systems we rely on to protect us from the darkness that can hide in plain sight. To understand how truly terrifying Israel Keyes was, you have to understand how he broke every rule in the serial killer playbook. For decades, the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit had built its profiles on a set of established patterns. Serial killers tend to have a type, a specific kind of victim they target. They tend to operate in a specific geographic area, a comfort zone, close to their home or work. They are often driven by a psychological compulsion that causes them to escalate their crimes, making them easier to catch over time. Israel Keyes did none of these things. He was a completely new breed of predator. He had no victim type. He didn't kill close to home. He would fly thousands of miles to another state, Vermont, Washington, New York, Texas, commit a murder, and then fly home to his quiet life, leaving behind a crime that local police had no way of connecting to any other. His method was chilling in its patience and foresight. For years, Keyes traveled the country on what he called murder vacations. But he wasn't just traveling to find victims, he was planting what he called kill kits. These were 5-gallon buckets filled with guns, zip ties, shovels, cash, and tools for body disposal. He would bury these kits in remote locations all over the United States. Then, months or even years later, when he felt the urge to kill, he would fly to a city near one of his buried kits, rent a car, dig up his supplies and go hunting. This method made him a ghost. There was no link between him and his victims. There was no link between the crimes themselves. He was a statistical impossibility, a killer who seemed to emerge from nowhere and disappear without a trace. He was not a crazed lunatic. He was a patient, rational, and highly organized predator who had studied the methods of law enforcement and designed a system of killing that was almost perfect. For over a decade, this ghost moved through the country, leaving a trail of missing persons and unsolved homicides in his wake. But in 2012, in his own hometown of Anchorage, Alaska, he finally made a mistake. The crime that would ultimately lead to his downfall was the abduction of an 18-year-old barista named Samantha Koenig. On a cold February night, Koenig was finishing her closing shift at a small, isolated coffee stand. Keyes, wearing a ski mask, appeared at the window, brandishing a gun. He forced her to turn off the lights, bound her hands, and marched her away into the darkness. The entire abduction was captured on the coffee stand's security camera, a silent, terrifying piece of footage that would soon galvanize the entire state of Alaska. The investigation began, led by the Anchorage Police Department and the local FBI field office. But they had nothing to go on. There was no forensic evidence. The abduction seemed completely random. For weeks, the case went cold. The investigators were facing the nightmare scenario. A victim who had seemingly vanished into thin air, taken by a predator who had left no clues. But Keyes, for all his meticulous planning, had an ego. And he had a desire for money that would prove to be his undoing. Weeks after he had abducted and murdered Samantha Koenig, he began to play a twisted game. He sent a text message from her phone to her boyfriend demanding a ransom of $30,000 be deposited into her bank account. He promised she would be returned if the ransom was paid. The family and the police knew it was a lie, but they played along, hoping it would give them a lead. They deposited the money, and then, they waited. This is where the story shifts from a haunting mystery to a high-stakes manhunt. Israel Keyes, the man who had been so careful for so long, made his first critical error. He started using Samantha Koenig's debit card. He made a small withdrawal from an ATM in Anchorage. Then, he left Alaska and went on a 2-week cruise with his family. When he returned, he got back in his car and began a long cross-country road trip. And all along the way, he kept using the debit card at ATMs in Arizona, New Mexico, and finally Texas. For the investigators in Anchorage, these small electronic breadcrumbs were the first real break in the case. A massive multi-agency effort was launched to track the card's usage. They pulled security footage from every ATM. They began to piece together a timeline and a route. They had the image of a man, and the make and model of his car, a white Ford Focus. An all-points bulletin was put out. The investigators in Anchorage, who had been up against a phantom, suddenly had threads they could pull. Those breadcrumbs, those small electronic traces, were enough to transform a ghost into a person with a past and a path. For years he had been able to disappear. For one fatal mistake, he left a thread, and that thread would be the beginning of the end. The thread and the unraveling. This is where the story shifts from a haunting mystery to a high-stakes manhunt. Israel Keyes, the man who had been so careful for so long, made his first critical error. He started using Samantha Koenig's debit card. He made a small withdrawal from an ATM in Anchorage, then he left Alaska and went on a 2-week cruise with his family. When he returned, he got back in his car and began a long cross-country road trip. And all along the way, he kept using the debit card at ATMs in Arizona, New Mexico, and finally Texas. For the investigators in Anchorage, these small electronic breadcrumbs were the first real break in the case. A massive multi-agency effort was launched to track the card's usage. They pulled security footage from every ATM. They began to piece together a timeline and a route. They had the image of a man, and the make and model of his car, a white Ford Focus. An all-points bulletin was put out. The investigators in Anchorage, who had been up against a phantom, suddenly had threads they could pull. They traced movements, transactions, and tiny behavioral footprints that together formed a path. For the family, every small clue carried the unbearable weight of hope and fear. For investigators, those same clues were a lifeline, the slim thread between a missing person and justice. What followed was an intense effort to follow that path and to bring clarity to what had been chaos. It was a case that tested the limits of pattern recognition, collaboration, and patience. He was a ghost in the system who shattered every rule. He moved like a shadow across towns and time and yet left in the end one thread. And that thread, small, electronic, human, would lead to the unraveling. It is a reminder that evil can disguise itself as normalcy, that danger can be ordinary, and that the systems we trust are only as strong as the clues we can find. Read Maureen Callahan's American Predator to understand the depths of this case and the lessons it holds for modern investigative work. On March 13, 2012, a state trooper in a small town in East Texas pulled over a white Ford Focus for a minor traffic violation. The trooper ran the license plate and got a hit. The car was connected to a high-priority abduction case in Alaska. With his gun drawn, he arrested the driver. The driver was a quiet, polite, and completely unassuming 34-year-old local contractor named Israel Keyes. The ghost was finally in custody. This part of the story is a powerful tribute to the dogged, often tedious, but absolutely essential work of law enforcement. Keyes was not caught by some brilliant FBI profiler having a flash of insight. He was caught because hundreds of officers, analysts, and agents did the painstaking work of following a single tiny thread until it led them to their man. It was a victory for old-fashioned, systematic police work. The mind of the predator, a game of chess in a jail cell. The arrest of Israel Keyes was just the beginning of the story. The investigators had their man, but they had no idea who he really was. They believed they had caught a kidnapper and a bank robber. They had no idea they were sitting across from one of the most prolific and unique serial killers in American history. The final act of American Predator takes place largely inside a small, sterile interrogation room in the Anchorage FBI headquarters, and it is a chilling and unforgettable psychological drama. It's a cat-and-mouse game, a battle of wits between the calm, collected, and monstrously intelligent killer, and a team of dedicated investigators who are desperately trying to get him to reveal the full extent of his crimes. Keyes was unlike any criminal they had ever encountered. He was not interested in a plea bargain to save his own life. In fact, he was adamant that he wanted the death penalty. He was not driven by a desire to brag about his crimes. His motivation was something else entirely. He was a connoisseur of his own evil, and he wanted to talk to people who could appreciate his work. But he would only talk on his own terms. He laid out the rules. He would only give them information in exchange for something he wanted: a cup of coffee, his favorite music, or most chillingly, the details of other serial killer investigations. He wanted to learn from the mistakes of others. Over the course of several months in a series of haunting interviews, Keyes slowly began to reveal the secrets he had held for over a decade. He confessed to the murder of Samantha Koenig, and he led the investigators to her body. He then confessed to the 2011 murder of a couple in Vermont, Bill and Lorraine Currier, a crime that had baffled police. He described how he had flown to the East Coast, dug up one of his kill kits and stalked the couple before abducting them from their home, killing them and disposing of their bodies in an abandoned farmhouse. He talked about his crimes with a calm, detached, and chilling rationality. There was no remorse, no emotion. He explained that he killed people simply because he enjoyed it. It was the ultimate expression of power. The interrogations are a terrifying journey into the mind of a true psychopath, a human being who seemed to be completely lacking the hardware for empathy. The investigators, led by a calm and patient agent named Steve Payne, did a masterful job of building a rapport with Keyes and slowly getting him to open up. But they always knew he was in control. He would give them the detailed story of one murder, but then hint at many, many more. He told them he had killed at least 8 people, but probably more. He alluded to crimes in Washington, New York, and other states, but he would never give them all the names. He held those secrets back as his final, ultimate act of power. The story of Israel Keyes is not just the story of a single monstrous individual. It is also the story of a systemic failure. This is where the idea of the fifth risk becomes terrifyingly relevant. Keyes was so successful for so long because he brilliantly exploited the cracks in the American law enforcement system. He knew that different police departments in different states often didn't communicate effectively. He knew that a random missing person case in Vermont would likely never be connected to another one in Washington. In December of 2012, before the FBI could get any more information from him, Israel Keyes took his own life in his jail cell. He left behind a bloody, rambling suicide note, but no answers. He took the names of his other victims with him to the grave. The final haunting message of American Predator is that we will never know the full truth. How many other families out there are still waiting for a loved one who was a victim of the ghost, Israel Keyes? The book is a terrifying but necessary read. It forces us to confront the reality that true evil is not always a chaotic emotional force. It can be patient, it can be intelligent, and it can be hiding behind the most ordinary of masks. It is a powerful reminder of the fragility of our own safety, and a profound and moving tribute to the dedicated, often anonymous investigators who stand as a thin line of defense against the darkness. It's an inquiry into the deepest and most disturbing questions of human nature. If you believe we must look into the darkness to understand the light, then you are in the right place. Welcome to Geeky Philosopher. Subscribe, and let's continue the inquiry.